Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. This is the second video in a series about how to create a marketplace-style e-commerce website using Wix and Stripe Connect. In the previous video, we talked about how to start onboarding your sellers by creating their Stripe Connect accounts. And in this video, we are going to be talking about the next step in that onboarding process, which is to listen to this account.updated webhook in order to confirm that the onboarding process has been completed successfully. This will be useful not only for the onboarding process, but we'll also learn a lot about all of the webhooks and event listening that you'll need to be doing with regard to your Stripe Connect integration. So I highly recommend watching this video if you're interested, and let's get started. Okay, so first of all, let's start off with a short recap of what we did in the first part. So what we did is build out this homepage with two buttons, one for people who are going to be selling on the website and the other for people who are just going to be buyers. And when you click Start as a Seller, it takes you to a form after you sign up for the Wix website. So here you'll be prompted to log in or sign up. So let me just sign up with email, and I'll say Eitan plus tester2 at thewixwiz.com, and I'll give it a password. And once you're logged in as a member, you will have access to the onboarding form on our website. Okay, the seller onboarding, which is this very simple form over here. And you add your name, first name, last name, and just a product type, which is just really a generic concept that I put as an example for something that you might typically put in this form. So let me just have here Bob, Dylan, and I'm just going to select computers because that's what I'm going to be selling as a vendor. And then when we click this Start Onboarding with Stripe, then it will take us to the onboarding page for Stripe. So it kind of calls an API in the background, and it submits this initial form, and it takes us to this onboarding. And just taking a look here at the code on the site itself. So we have the page itself with the seller onboarding. And what it does is it submits the data that was submitted to the form to a database, and then it calls the API from the backend in order to create the onboarding experience through Stripe. Okay, so that's what we did in the first part. And in this part, we're going to be continuing the onboarding process by setting up the webhook that you need to listen to in order to get data about the onboarding. Because if we take a look over here, again, just a refresher. So here we were following the documentation over here, and we got to this point where we're handling users returning to the platform. And we were told here that we need to listen to account.updated webhooks because the URL that takes us back to the site, which is the return URL, it doesn't return state. Okay, it doesn't give us any additional information about the onboarding. And so we need to get that state from, okay, you see here, no state is passed through this URL. So we need to get the information about the onboarding that has been completed through this webhook. And if we went here to the documentation, then we can find here how to set up a webhook using code. But after doing some searching on Stripe, I found that you also have the option to set up the webhook through kind of a UI. And as much as I like code, I prefer to do it this way if it's possible, because why write 100 lines of code just to set up a webhook when I can easily go to dashboard.stripe.com/webhooks and then go over here and click Add an Endpoint. And this is where we're going to set up the webhook for our site. We need to do some stuff on the website before we can actually set up the webhook, but this is where we're going to be doing the setup. So if you're up to date, then great, then we're going to pick up from here. But if you feel a little lost in everything that I just said, then I would recommend going back and watching part 1 again or for the first time, just to bring you up to speed and make sure you have all the code that you need in order to start from this point. So in order to set up the webhook, we're going to need to have an endpoint URL. And in order to do this, we're going to be using Wix HTTP functions. Okay, basically it allows us to set up kind of an API on our server that we can listen to, or we can submit here to listen to these events, and then Stripe will send us the data every time the event occurs. So let's head over to our website, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see better. And we're going to go to the backend, and we're going to add in expose site API HTTP functions. If you don't know what these are, I have a tutorial specifically about this and specifically about setting up webhooks using HTTP functions. So do check that out if you're feeling a little lost at any point in this explanation. So in order to set up HTTP functions, I'm going to take a look at the Wix documentation for that. So let me head over to the documentation. And this is the documentation for HTTP functions, and there's quite a lot going on here, but we're not going to be using it all. Mostly, we're going to be using one function, which is going to be a use function, which essentially means it could be get or post or anything. And what we're going to be doing is just using that function as the webhook. So let's go ahead back to the site, and I'm going to say export function. And the naming of the function has to be structured like this. So first you'll have the method, okay, the HTTP method, then underscore, and then the name of the function. So I'm going to say use, which essentially means any HTTP request. So it could be post, it could be get. And here I'm going to call this just Stripe webhook. And then this comes in with a request. And once we get the request, I'm just going to add here for now console.log request. And I'm going to send back a OK, a 200 status, which basically means that we received the webhook and everything is working as expected. And sometimes when you're setting up a webhook, so the server that's sending the webhook expects to get that back when they're sending out the webhook. Otherwise, there might be some kind of problem. So let's go ahead and add that in. So I'm going to say here import OK from HTTP, no, maybe Wix HTTP functions. And then all I need to do over here is return OK. And this is kind of like a built-in method of Wix that just returns like a status 200 as if the request had been processed correctly. So now that we have this set up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and publish the site. And the URL for this this exported function, for this HTTP function, is going to be like this. So it's going to be, let me comment it out. It's going to be HTTPS and // and then it's going to be the domain. So if we go to the live site, I'm going to head back here to the live site. So it's going to be this domain. Again, this might be slightly different if you have a premium site with your own domain or a Wix kind of free site that you're building on. So if it's a free site, then it'll be built like this. And if it's a premium site, then it'll just be your domain. So I'm going to copy this over. And then after that, it's going to be underscore functions, and then / Stripe webhook. Okay, so this should be the URL for our webhook. And if you're wondering where I got this, so again, it's just the documentation, and you can see right here the structure. Okay, this is how it should be built. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go into our dashboard. Let me zoom in here a little bit as well. And I'm going to go to Developer Tools and Logs. And here I'm going to be checking and seeing that we actually get some kind of log here when we try to process the request. Okay, so that's essentially this console.log request. I'll even just add in kind of a text over here before the actual log, just so we know what that is. Publish that again. And I always like to check the URL first in my browser. Again, this would only be relevant if it's a GET request. I don't think this will work if it's a POST request, but since I'm using use, so this should still work. So I'm going to go ahead and select this and just put it in my browser. And we should get back a status 200, but since we're not getting back any HTML or anything like that, it just shows us this error here. And let's see, I don't see a log. So that's a bit worrying to me. Let's take a look and see if I made any kind of typo. Oh, okay, here I have HTTPS twice, so let's make sure that that's not the case. And let me try one more time, see if that was it. There we go. Okay, that's more like what I was expecting. And here you can see the request that came in. Okay, so here there's lots of metadata that comes in with the request that Wix processes and marks and stuff like that. Most of this is not going to be relevant to us. What we're really going to be looking for is the actual body that Stripe sends. Okay, so in order to test this now with Stripe, what I'm going to need to do is take this webhook URL and go to the Stripe dashboard and put this as the endpoint URL. Okay, and here I'm going to listen to events on the account. And at the moment, I am going to not select any events, and hopefully that will listen for all events. So I'm just going to go ahead and add in this endpoint, and Stripe doesn't let me do that. So let me select events to listen to. And for now, I'm just going to listen to the event that we need, which is the onboarding. So let's see. I think that would be in account. I think they actually told us in the documentation what it is. So listen to account.updated webhook. So if we go over here, account.updated. Okay, so this is the webhook that we need to be listening to. And I'm going to go ahead and add in that event. And I'm going to add the endpoint. And depending on how many events we end up listening to in the future with Stripe, I might decide to split this webhook up into several different endpoints, or maybe add another path here that's specifically for different events. But since we only have one event that we're listening to at the moment, I'm just going to leave it super simple. So now what I would typically do is see if Stripe has any way to test this, to test this. So let's see. Oh, let's go into test mode. Did you mean live mode? No, I meant test mode. View all test mode items. Oh, okay. I guess I have to add the webhook in test mode as well. Interesting. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm going to add that in here and select the event and add that in. Awesome. So now I'm in test mode, which is good because that's where we're going to be testing everything. And I have an ID here. And I see that there's a signing secret here. So this signing secret is something that we're going to want to check inside of our webhook in order to verify that this is actually a webhook that's coming from Stripe and not somebody who's just trying to hack our site. Because this URL, I mean, obviously, if you're watching the tutorial, then you know about it, but if somebody was to somehow figure out that this is the endpoint for our webhook, then they could technically send something that looks very much like a Stripe event and try and kind of hack our site and submit data that we don't actually want. And that's why we want to have this signing secret in there as well. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to reveal this signing secret, and I'm going to copy it over, and I'm going to go into our developer tools secret manager, and I'm going to add that in as a secret here inside of the secrets manager. And here again, I'm not sure if every event that I have will have a different signing secret, or if it's kind of just one signing secret for all of the events that we're going to have through Stripe. So again, that's something that we'd have to figure out a little more down the road if we listen to any more events through Stripe. So let me go ahead and store the secret. So I'm going to say Stripe event secret, and I'm going to paste it right over here. And yeah, if you ever see it kind of pop there to the second line, then you'd want to go ahead and hit backspace so it doesn't add like an extra character at the end. You can also just open it up and verify that your cursor here is right after the last character, because otherwise the API key won't work. So let's go ahead and click Save. And now we can set up the actual webhook. So what I'm going to do, since I didn't see any option to actually test this via this dashboard over here, which would have been kind of nice. If anybody from Stripe is listening, then I think, I don't know, or maybe I just can't find it. But either way, let's add that in. So I'm going to go, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and fire this event off by actually creating an account on our website. Okay, and this should all work. There shouldn't be any need to publish the site again because we have our site published with the webhook and we have Stripe set up to kind of send us that webhook. So I'm going to go back to the site and I'm going to complete this onboarding again. Let me just refresh to make sure we're using the newest version of the site. And let's try again with Bob Dylan. And last name, oh, sorry. Dylan's the last name. And product type computers. And let's start the onboarding with Stripe. And yeah, later on, I'm definitely going to add like a loader here or something as we're preparing that kind of URL. And email is not needed in test mode. And mobile number should not also be needed in test mode. Okay, let's see. Verification, use test code. Yeah, sure. And details, let's say Bob Dylan. It would be nice if this populated using what I'd already submitted. Website, I don't need that. Oh, I have to. www.thewixwiz.com. And let's see, next. Use test bank credentials instead. Use test account. Continue. And submit. Okay, so this is where the webhook should be firing. Moment of truth. Oh, shoot. Okay, so I made a bit of an amateur mistake here by not opening the logs first. So you want to make sure that the logs are open before you actually submit. So what I'm going to do now, to not burden you, because you know what to do already, so I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to submit the form again and then just show you what pops up in the logs. I submitted the form again, and I'm on the onboarding completed page, which technically should mean that it was successful. But if I head over here to the logs, then I do see all the logs for the account setup. So here we get kind of the what we use to get the actual onboarding URL. And we did redirect to the onboarding completed page, which should indicate that everything is okay, but I do not see the webhook received here. And I also do not see any kind of log of the webhook on the Stripe website itself. So that would be, it would be easier to figure out, I think, if we did see it here, but not on our side. But since we're not seeing it in Stripe as well, I'm going to need to dig a little deeper and try and figure out why the event didn't fire after we actually onboarded. Okay, so good news. I found the reason, I think. I did some burrowing in the documentation, and I found this reference to connect webhooks. And apparently, to give you the long story short, there are separate webhooks for accounts, so your own Stripe account, and for connect accounts, which are connect webhooks. And when you're setting up the actual webhook, you need to make sure to select connect account. And you might have seen it while I was setting it up and like been screaming at the screen that I'm not doing the right thing. But I missed it. And now what I need to do is essentially create a webhook while selecting the correct option. So if I go back here to the webhooks, so you can see here that it says that the type of this webhook is account. And this needs to say connect. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up a new endpoint. And I'm going to be using the same URL. So let's get that URL. Just going to copy it over. And here, so instead of listening to events on your account, I need to be listening to events on connected accounts. Okay, and I'm going to select the same event, so account.dated, and I'm going to add the event, and I'm going to add this endpoint. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to fill out the onboarding form again, and hopefully this time we're listening to the right event and we will see something happening. Okay, so I have submitted the form again. And now if I go over here to the logs, then you can see here that we are getting not only one webhook, but several webhooks from the account.update endpoint. And if I check here on the Stripe dashboard as well, I'm just going to go ahead and refresh that. I think we should see a list of events. So let me go in and check that out. Yeah, okay, so here we see several events for account.updated. I'm not really sure why we got so many different ones. But let's go here and see the documentation. So we don't need this anymore, we don't need this anymore, and we don't need this anymore, but we're over here, and it says that we're supposed to be looking for the state of the details submitted parameter. Okay, so let's see if we can find that details submitted parameter. Details submitted. Okay, so here it says details submitted false. Okay, and here I'm guessing it'll say false as well. Let's take a look. I don't think I even see details submitted here. Oh, there, false. And let's just check the last one where it probably will say true. So let's go ahead and true. Okay, so basically we got several webhooks throughout the onboarding process, probably for different information that they input. Maybe each time they move between one of those subsections of the onboarding process, it shoots out a webhook. I'm not sure exactly, but what's important here is that we want to check in the final webhook and see that we got this submitted, details submitted as true. Oh, interesting. I see here both details submitted true and details submitted false. I wonder why we have both of those. Let's see what the second one is. Okay, so to figure out why we had two of those details submitted, I took the data that would come back from a typical webhook and I put it here in JSON viewer, which basically allows me to kind of expand and collapse different parts of the JSON and kind of just view specifically what I want, as opposed to seeing one very long JSON that's hard to understand what is under what. And so I see here that, so on the top level, we get back the ID of the event. We get back the account this event was relevant to, and here we have the actual data, which is nested under this object. Okay, so we have this object over here, and this is where we see the actual details submitted equals true. And the details submitted equals false was under this previous attributes, which I'm going to guess is just a kind of snapshot of the state before this current state. So that way you can like see what changed between the previous update and this current update. So that's kind of why we probably have two different details submitted. One is true, one is false. But the important one, which is in the actual data object of this event, is true. And basically what we're going to want to do here now is once we get this event and we check and we see that the details submitted equals true, we're going to want to update this in some way in our database. And in order to do that, we actually have to take a step back and we have to attribute the account to the actual user. So let me go and head back to the editor. And here we have the API where we're creating the actual Stripe accounts. And so we use the this endpoint for creating the account. And what we return here is the account link dot URL. And what I actually want to do is once we create an account, I want to store the data regarding that account in my database. Even though the person hasn't completed the onboarding, I want to have some record of this account that we created, specifically the account ID. So if we go over here to our logs, then we can see here that we were logging this account when it's created. Okay, so that's right over here. You'll see that right after we create the account, we logged this account object, and here is the account ID. Okay, and you'll see if we compare this to what came back from our webhook. Okay, so that's the same ID. Okay, so we have account underscore one and something, and here we have account underscore one and etc. Okay, so this is going to be the kind of the point of truth that we're going to be able to use in order to compare the account that we have on file and the webhooks that we get back. So we're going to need to store this, and the best place to do it would be to store it over here. In order to do that, we're going to need to get the ID of the member that is trying to create this account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import current member from Wix members backend. And what I'm going to do over here is before even creating the account, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const member equals await current member dot get member. And then we can also say that const member ID equals to await, equals to member dot ID. And then we can use this member ID in order to query our seller's database and get this account using the member ID. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say we're going to need to import Wix data over here. Import Wix data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const sellers query result equals to await, let me make this a little smaller, await Wix data dot query, and we're going to be querying the seller's collection. If you're not sure what the collection is called or what you called it, you can always go back here and copy the ID, and we're going to be querying it and looking for where the member ID field equals to member ID. And then we're going to find, and here I'm going to suppress auth, just in case at some point the permissions of this collection are that they are can only be read by admin for security purposes. And I'm going to say const seller equals to seller's query result dot items 0, because we're only expecting to get back one seller with each member ID. And here I'm going to add a clause, which is a condition that says that if no seller, okay, so if this is kind of undefined, then I'm going to return. Okay, so we're going to exit this function. We're not even going to create an account. And now what we're going to do here is after we create the account, we're going to update this seller with this new account ID. So first of all, I'm going to go to the collection and I'm going to open it. And we're going to add in this account ID field. Okay. Oh, oops, I see the member ID here is not storing correctly. So that's something to note. That would have broken everything. So we're going to have to fix that. But I also see the product types is not storing correctly. Oh, it's very good I went in here to check everything out because I see here, oh, I guess I had a typo. Go away. Product type and product types. Okay, let's change this to product type. and save that. And this is not going to be an object, this is going to be a text field. Sorry to go on this detour, but I might as well fix it while we're here. And then this we can get rid of. It's just a difference of I wrote types and type, not a big deal. This problem is something that we're going to have to fix. But let's add in our new account ID. So let's add Stripe account ID. And what we're going to do now is after we create the account, we're going to update this seller with the account ID. But what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to use the seller that we got back from this query, but I'm actually going to fetch the data again from the database, just in case something changed there in between, and I want to get the most fresh data that I can. So I'm going to say const, or I'm just going to say here, seller equals to await. And here I'm going to need to change this to let. And let me zoom back in just so you can see what's going on here. So here I'm going to have seller equals await Wix data dot get, and we're going to be getting from the seller's database, and we're going to be getting the seller which the ID equals to this seller. So it's going to be seller.id. And then once we got that seller, we can say seller.stripe account ID equals to, and here we're going to have account dot, and we can find this from our logs, so it's account.id, okay, account.id. And then we're going to call update, so we're going to say here const updated seller equals to await Wix data dot update, and here we're going to have sellers, and we're going to have seller. And I'm just going to add in suppress auth everywhere that I possibly can. True. And add it over here as well. Awesome. And then we can also log here. So here we can log the Stripe account. So let's go over here and I'm going to call this Stripe account. And here I'm going to add in another log that will be console.log updated seller. Just that we have everything being logged in case we hit any problems later on. Awesome. And now that we have this set up, one last thing that I want to do, let's fix that issue that we had with the member ID in the front end before we forget. So I'm going to go here to the seller onboarding and here, so member ID. So I set it accidentally as await current member.getMember. But this should actually be member ID. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say const member equals to await. And oh, no, sorry. I'm going to put it in here. Await current member dot get member. And then here instead, I'm going to have member dot ID. So that should fix that issue that we had over there. And one last thing that I want to do is to verify the registration key of the webhook. If you remember, I mentioned that earlier. We have this, the signing secret, not registration key, signing secret. And I want to just see where that signing secret would be found within the webhook. So that is probably hashed somehow. Let's see if there's anything here in the documentation. Let's try searching for it. So signing key. Use incoming webhooks to get real-time updates. That is what we're doing. And event type, live mode API version. Webhook integration, Okay, give me a moment to find it and we'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I found it and it's here under the webhooks documentation, surprise. And here we say verify events, or Stripe says verify events are sent from Stripe. And they explain a little bit that the signature in each event Stripe signature header. Okay, so they're sending basically the signature, okay, that's this, the signing secret, inside of a header that's called Stripe signature. But what I did is I went to the webhook and I grabbed the full request that we got here inside of our backend, and I put it here into the JSON viewer, and I was looking for the Stripe signature header, which I found. And I see here that it looks nothing like the Stripe signature that we stored inside of our secrets manager, if you recall. So I continued reading the documentation, and what I found is that we need to verify the signature using a Stripe library. Okay, so Stripe has a specific library used for verifying the signatures. So what we need to do over here is set that up. So what we're going to do is follow this documentation that they have here. And here we have the endpoint secret. And then what they do here is try event equals stripe dot webhooks dot construct event. And then we have here request body, signature, endpoint secret, and then that should construct the event. Let's give it a try. So since we already have Stripe being imported, or do we have we don't have that inside of our HTTP functions. So let's go over here, and inside of our HTTP functions, I'm going to create a new function, and I'm going to call this function construct Stripe event. Whoops, not export, but function. What I want, function. And it's going to be called construct Stripe event. And what we're going to do is we'll pass in here the body. And what we can do is also import get secret from the Wix secrets backend. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say const signing key equals to await get secret. And here we're going to have the secret name, which is, if we take a look at our secrets manager, which seems to be taking a long time to load. But this is the chance for you to go ahead and like the video, to leave a comment if you have a question or you just want to say something, and subscribe to the channel if you do want to see more videos like this every week. Especially if you want me to continue this series, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, give a like so I know that somebody's watching. So I'm going to select this Stripe event secret. That's what I called it here in the back end. And I'm going to paste that right over here. Whoa. And we need to turn this into an asynchronous function. So we have the body and we have the key. And now we're going to need to use the Stripe package. So similarly to what we did over here, okay, we're just going to go ahead and use Stripe like this. Okay, so Stripe equals require Stripe with the API key. So I'm just going to copy this right over. And again, I'm not going to go explain this again because we did it in the first video. So if you didn't watch the first video, please do. And going to copy that right over here. And now what we need to do is essentially use that same thing that we saw here in the documentation. Sorry for all the jumping around. And that's this over here. So event equals stripe.webhooks.construct event. So I'm going to put that right over here. And I'm going to be very lazy with error handling. I'm going to say I'm going to do it all later. So let event equals stripe.webhooks.construct event. So here we have the request body. Okay, so we're going to pass the body in over here. And I'm going to just get rid of that. And here we have the signature. So that's the, you have the signature. So this is going to be, okay. This is going to be the signature header, I'm pretty sure. And this is going to be our signing key. 95% sure about that. Let me see. Let me close this. And let me see if there's any kind of documentation here. No, there probably is somewhere, but just based on what they called these different variables, that's going to be my guess. Okay. So yeah, back to the editor. So we need to get this signature from the header. Or we can call it maybe header signature is a better name for that. Header signature. And we can pass that in here as well. So a header signature. And these are two things that we're going to be getting from the request. So we can say here const body equals to request dot body and const signature header equals to request. And here I need to take another look at the HTTP functions documentation. Let's see, request and headers. So dot headers. Okay, so and then we're going to want this specific header, which is not content type, but it's the Stripe signature header. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say request dot headers, and then I'm going to tap into specifically to the Stripe signature header. Okay, and then I can say here const event equals to, and I'm going to call this function, so construct Stripe event. I'm going to pass in the body and the header signature. Oh, I flipped the name here as well. So that's going to be like that. And we need to make sure here to return the event. And I'm very curious what this event will look like. I'm guessing it looks very similar to whatever is in the inside of the body of the request. Yeah, but just verified by Stripe. And then here we can just do console.log event and event. Awesome. So yeah, I'm totally ready to take this for a spin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add in just a log for the header signature, which is something that I'm a bit worried about. So here we're going to have header signature. Just because the testing is going to take a long time for this, and I want to do as few tests as possible, so I want to log some key, you know, potential failures in advance, just to make sure. Otherwise, I think it looks okay. This is the main thing which I think can go bad, or if I got one of these wrong in terms of what they actually mean. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to publish this. And I'm going to go and submit our form again to create a new webhook submission essentially. And once we, you know what, before we do that actually, I take that back. Before we do that, so after we receive this event, what we're going to want to do is essentially check and see that the submitted, what was it called? Details submitted value is true. And if it's true, we'll want to mark that inside of this collection. So let me open up this collection. And again, I'm doing as many things as possible before testing, just because testing is a little burdensome with the setup that we have, because we have to fill out all the forms in order to test. So I'm going to add in here another field, and it's just going to be a Boolean field. And I'm going to call this account, call it Stripe account details submitted. And we're just going to mark this with a check mark if it has been submitted. So let's create a function which does that. And I'm just going to call this function conditionally mark details submitted. And the reason it's going to be conditionally is because we're only going to mark the details submitted if the details submitted value came back as true. So we're going to pass in the event here. And I'm going to import Wix data here as well. And once we get the event, I'm going to check and see if the details submitted is true. So I'm going to say const details submitted equals to. It's going to be event dot. And I'm going to assume the structure of the event is the same here. That's also a potential failure point. But if I go and just double check the structure of the event, so we basically want to tap into data and then object and then details submitted. Okay, so it's data dot object dot details submitted. And then if not details submitted, then we're just going to return. We're not going to do anything. So when our webhook fires off the first few times that details weren't submitted, just nothing is going to happen. And then here, what we're going to do is if the details are submitted, then we'll say const, let's use current member here as well. In the future, what I'll probably do is create like a specific function which just retrieves a seller based on whoever the current member is, like just to prevent us from doing this over and over again. But for now, I'm just going to do it the long way. So here we're going to have current member, member equals to await current member dot get member. And I can actually copy over some of the code that we did from the other one. So here, same thing as what we did over here, basically. Okay, so we're just retrieving the seller with the member ID. So we need this as well. I'm just going to copy this over. Should I be a good coder now and fix it now? Okay, because I want to be a good role model, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new backend file, and I'm going to call it sellers. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a function, async function, and I'm going to call it get current member seller. And again, this is assuming a construct where there's only one seller account per member. So again, if you might provide the option for people to have one member account, but then they have several seller accounts, and then you'd have to construct a very different setup here. But I'm assuming one account per member. And I'm just going to copy over this code essentially. And we're going to need to import Wix data. And we're going to import current member from Wix members backend. And I'm going to export this function. And then what we can do essentially is import that here. So say import whatever the long name I gave this is from backend sellers. And then we can just completely switch this all out for const seller, let seller equal await get current member seller. Okay, so making our code more dry, reusable, and we can use the same thing. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put that in our HTTP functions as well. So here in the conditionally mark as submitted, instead of doing all of this, I'm just going to replace this with this. Okay, good. I'm feeling proud of myself. I hope you're proud of me too. Yeah, I do recommend doing that. Like once you identify something that you're doing over and over again in your code, try and separate it and create one function that deals with that you can reuse throughout your code. Highly recommended. So now that I got the seller here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say seller.details submitted equals true. And then I'm going to update it. So I'm going to say const updated seller equals to await wixdata dot update sellers, and here we're going to have the seller, and let's just suppress auth just in case, and let's return the updated seller. Awesome. Oops. Great. So now I'm going to use this here inside of our useStripe webhook. So once we get the event, we log the event. I'm going to say const updated seller equals to and await conditionally marked details submitted. Await conditionally marked details submitted, and this is going to be with the event. And then this is going to need to be an asynchronous function. And this is already getting a little dirty. We're doing a bunch of things here, and they're not as generic as what I would usually put under an endpoint called Stripe webhook. But again, that's something that I'm choosing to deal with when I set up another webhook. So once we get to another event that we need to set up, we'll focus on cleaning this out and making it more specific to this specific use case. Because if we don't have any other events that we're going to be listening to, then it's not the end of the world. So let's just do console.log updated seller, and we'll have the updated seller here. Okay, great. So now that we're doing pretty much everything that we wanted to do, I'm going to go ahead and publish this, and I'm going to submit the form in order to test this out. Okay, so brief pause in testing because we have an error. Surprise, surprise, after writing that much code. And the error actually came as punishment for me being a good boy and doing the function, the separated function for finding the seller with the member ID. So you see here, this is where we have the error in the back end. And just based on the flow, I know it's happening over here. And the reason is because I only put in this condition that if there's no seller, then we should return, because this was the logic for short-circuiting the previous function. But instead, what I should actually be doing is be returning the seller. And that way it will return both if there is a seller and if not. And in the original function is where I want to be doing the short-circuiting. So I should say here, if no seller, then return. Okay, and I think that this should do what we want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this. I'm going to start testing again, and I'll let you know if I'm either successful or if we hit another snag. Okay, so we have another problem. I'm not sure what it is yet. It has to do with the method that we were using over here. So inside the HTTP functions, using this construct event method, something went wrong here. I'm still not sure what. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and put this in a try catch, even though this is not technically it's not a promise per se, but I do see that they have it inside of try catch over here. So let's try that out. So I'm going to put that inside of try catch. Let's have this over here. So I'm going to say try catch and put that over here. Otherwise, we'll just console, because I need to see what the error is in order to deal with it. Console error. We should probably have this here anyways. And what I want to do now is instead of trying to fill out my entire form again, I'm going to try to run this function here in the back end using export. And in terms of the body, so what I'll do, I think, did I log the body? No, I guess I didn't log the body. But I might have that. I might have that somewhere else. Let's see if I can get the body. So that would be here, request. Let me get this entire request. And I'm going to put this in my JSON viewer. And body. Okay, so it's not letting me see the body. This may be where my problem is, because when I get back, let's take a look here at the HTTP function documentation, and we see your body, and here, so I just did request that body, but I didn't actually turn it into another format like text or JSON or something like that. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to try turning the body into JSON, because I have a feeling that is what the issue is. So I'm going to go over here, request that body.json, and this is going to be a promise, turning from JSON into a JSON object. That's always a promise. And let's see if I can still test it anyways. So let me use this one that we have here from Stripe. Oh, webhook delivery failed. Okay, that's why we didn't return 200, because we never reached this okay, because eventually we had some issues along the way. So we didn't return okay. So if you're wondering what happens when you don't return okay, that's what happens. But we can still hopefully see, yeah, this is the entire request. So let me copy this over. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say const body equals to this whole thing. And we don't need that. And we don't need that. Okay, so const body will be equal to this whole thing. And then here, what I'll do, I'll say const header signature equals to, and I'm going to grab the header signature that we got back over here, because we did log that over here, and that logged successfully. So this was the header signature. So I'm going to copy that over, if I can. Copy that right over here. And here, instead of passing these two parameters, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these parameters that I constructed over here. So here we're passing in this body, and we're going to pass in this header signature. And this will allow me hopefully to test it without having to run through the entire flow again. So let me go ahead and run that. Okay. Webhook payload must be provided as a string or a buffer. That is valuable information, because that means that what I did with JSON probably would not have worked. But what I can do here is, just to verify that that is going to work, let me go and change this, over here in HTTP functions. I'm going to change this from just body to JSON.stringify body. JSON.stringify body. Let's see if that works. If that works, I don't need any changes. Even though it's kind of going like this in order to do it, we could probably also use .text, but if it works, it works. And that's what's important. So let me try that out. Okay. No signatures found matching expected signature for payload. Are you passing the raw body request you received from Stripe? I don't know. I don't know if we're doing that. Okay, so I've come back from a rather long debugging session, and I come with some good news and some bad news. Good news is I've identified the bugs. I've also found a cool way to just resend the webhooks here from the dashboard, so that I don't need to go through the whole onboarding process just to test the webhook. So I could just resend and then test the whole flow of what happens when a webhook comes in. And through that process of testing the webhooks, I've identified several things. So one is that Stripe requires the raw body over here inside of the construct event. So for that, you need to use request.body.text. And just since we're using the request for two things, I decided it would be simpler to pass the request over here into the construct Stripe event and then break it down within the function as opposed to doing it here inside of the webhook. But that's just really an aesthetic choice. So that's key number one. Okay, so this needs to be request.body.text method and not request.body or not request.json. Okay, so none of those two. It needs to be request.body.text. And the second important thing is that I had forgotten to change our secret. So if you recall, each of our events has this signing secret, and the original signing secret that I had used was the one from our previous webhook that was for the account, the one that we couldn't actually use. And after we created this new webhook, which has its own unique signing secret, I didn't change that in the secrets manager. So that's why I was getting a bunch of errors that you didn't see. But believe me, they happened, and it was quite frustrating to figure out. But now that I did, just if you've been following along with the tutorial step by step, then you might have also encountered this and need to change your secret to this secret for the webhooks. So if you've done those things, then you should have it working. And you can see here, this event is what we got back from that method of the construct Stripe event. So that seems to be working. One more error that I encountered, and this is like a logical error on my part, is this permissions denied error. And this is coming from the seller's function. Okay, so here again, I'm being punished for trying to be good and creating reusable code because this actually is not usable for our use case in the event in the webhook. And the reason is because we have here this const member equals await current member dot get member, and this will only work if a logged in member is trying to run this function. But if we try and run this function from within the webhook, then there's no logged in member that's running that webhook. So this won't work. And that also highlighted another issue, which is essentially we shouldn't be trying to get the current member seller. We should be trying to be getting a seller using a Stripe account ID, because that's what we're going to be getting back from the webhook, and that's the reason we set up the whole account ID to begin with. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create another function, and this is going to be a function that's called get seller by account ID. Let's say even Stripe account ID. And what it will do essentially is we'll also have a query, but this query won't be with member ID, it will be with account ID. And here we're going to have Stripe account ID. Now let's just verify that that's the name of the field. Stripe account ID. Yep, that looks correct. And here we'll have the account ID. And this is what we're going to use inside of our HTTP functions instead of this get current member seller. So that's going to be over here. And here we're going to need to pass in the account ID, which will be equal to event dot. And here we can take a look here at our event. And it's not this, don't get confused, it's not this event ID. It's the event object, event ID object account. Okay, so that is what we're going for here. So this account, so it's event.account. Awesome. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to publish, and I'm going to clear my logs, and I'm going to run another test by just resending this last webhook that didn't work. So I'm going to click resend, and now let's take a peek at our logs and see if we have any joy. Okay, request came in, and updated seller. Let's see what we have here. Updated seller, details submitted true. Okay, so that worked. So now we have our webhook set up. We're going to be wrapping up in a moment. Just one thing that I want to stress is that if you don't want to use webhooks here, there is one other thing that you can do, which is to call the accounts API, again, to inspect the returning object. So instead of waiting for this webhook, you can, as soon as the person lands on the onboarding complete page that we set up, you can make a call to the API and check this as well. It's not as recommended because if something goes wrong and you don't end up landing on that page and you don't end up calling the accounts API function, then you can have this issue where you're not sure if the details submitted is true. Whereas the events, since they all run on the back end, it tends to be a little more secure and reliable because you know that the events will come in from Stripe, and if not, that's their fault. Assuming you set up everything correctly. It's also probably just a good idea to know how to set up the events for Stripe. I mean, what we did in this episode is going to be relevant for any other events that you set up using Stripe Connect, because I imagine there will be more that we'll need to do, and it's pretty good to know how to set this up if you're going to be using Stripe. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Next time we will be talking about this refresh URL. Okay, so this is really the last thing that we needed to do in terms of setting up the onboarding for Stripe. And then the episodes after that will already start dealing with how to let people create their own products and price them and for people to check out and stuff like that. So that is what's on the horizon. Do do like the video if you want to see the next parts of the series, because if I see that there's no interest, I might decide that it's not really worth it. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.